The days that followed were a blur of tension, distance, and quiet desperation. Emma visited the hospital every day, sometimes twice, drawn to the fragile baby girl like a magnet to steel. Each time she held the infant now named Lila. By the nurses, something inside her softened, yet the growing chasm between her and Ryan only deepened. Ryan avoided the subject entirely. He came home later and later, claiming deadlines, meetings, or exhaustion. They barely spoke except for the occasional awkward small talk or clipped questions about the dog, the bills, the weather. It was as though their marriage was suspended in some invisible fog, untouchable, unreachable. Emma could feel him slipping away. One evening, after returning from the hospital with Lila's sweet scent still clinging to her sweater, Emma found Ryan sitting in the dark, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. Max lay at his feet but stood immediately, wagging his tail at her entrance. Ryan barely looked up. "Hey," she said softly, removing her coat. "Hey," he murmured without meeting her eyes. Emma sat down across from him, her heart pounding with the words she knew she needed to say. She twisted her hands in her lap, steeling herself. "I want to adopt her," she finally whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan set his glass down slowly, exhaling a heavy breath. His eyes finally lifted to hers, tired, guarded, but burning with something she couldn't fully read. "Emma, you can't be serious," her voice cracked. "I'm completely serious." His head dropped into his hands, fingers running through his hair. "This isn't rational. You don't even know this baby. We've been through hell, Emma. You're trying to patch a wound that doesn't heal by bringing in. Don't." "You dare," she interrupted, her voice rising in sudden anger. "Don't you dare call her a patch. She's a child, a life. She was left to die, Ryan, and someone put us there at that moment. Max found her, but maybe it was us who needed to find her too." Ryan's expression hardened. "We are barely holding ourselves together. You want to add a baby into this mess? We don't work anymore, Emma." The words sliced through her like knives. "Is that what you really think?" she whispered, her heart splintering. "That we're broken beyond fixing?" He hesitated, but only for a second. And that single hesitation was enough. Emma stood abruptly, blinking away tears. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I knew you were already gone." Ryan stood too, his frustration rising. "Don't twist this into something it isn't. I'm trying to protect us. Protect you. From what?" she snapped. "From loving something again? From risking your heart? Or are you just done risking anything at all?" Max let out a low, anxious whine, circling near Emma's legs. Ryan's eyes burned into hers. "I can't do this," he muttered, grabbing his coat from the hook. "I need space." Emma's chest tightened. "Where are you going?" "Out," he said flatly. "Don't wait up." The door slammed behind him. Emma collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. Max climbed up beside her, pressing his head into her lap, and she clung to him as if he were the only anchor left in the world. Hours later, as the clock neared midnight, Ryan still hadn't come home. Emma's mind spiraled with dark thoughts. The quiet house felt suffocating, every creak of the walls pulling her deeper into her loneliness. Her phone buzzed. Ryan, staying at a hotel. Need time. Something inside her broke completely. The next morning, sleep-deprived and raw, Emma returned to the hospital. Isabel, the social worker, greeted her with an uneasy expression. "Emma, I'm glad you're here," Isabel said softly. We've found the baby's birth mother." Emma's breath caught in her chest. "What? She came?" "In this morning," Isabel explained gently. "She wants to speak to you." Emma's hands trembled. "Why me?" Isabel hesitated. "She specifically asked for the woman who found her baby." Emma's mind reeled. What kind of mother abandons her child in the cold, then suddenly returns? And why would she want to speak to the stranger who pulled that child from the brink of death? Her pulse quickened. Confusion, fear, and something else dread-curled in her stomach. She didn't know it yet. But what waited behind that hospital door wasn't just the child's mother. It was the key to a secret that would shatter everything Emma thought she knew about the baby, about Ryan, and about herself. The betrayal was already in motion. The next morning, Emma awoke before dawn. The house was still and cold, the early light barely touching the edges of the curtains. For a moment, she lay there, her hand resting on the empty space beside her. Ryan's side of the bed was cold. He had barely said a word to her the night before after they got home. He'd spent hours in his office with the door shut, claiming work emails, but Emma knew better. Their marriage wasn't just strained, it was unraveling. She sat up slowly, Max already alert at the foot of the bed, watching her with soft, concerned eyes. He hadn't left her side since the night before, as if sensing the emotional earthquake inside her. Emma ran her fingers through his fur, the tears already stinging her eyes before she could stop them. She couldn't shake the image of that baby. The fragile body, the desperate, soft cries, the way her heart had ached with something unfamiliar yet undeniable. It wasn't just pity. It was connection. As if somehow, in the blink of an eye, her empty heart had attached itself to that abandoned life dot by the time Ryan emerged from his office. Dressed for work, Emma was already dressed and clutching her car keys. "I'm going to the hospital," she said quietly. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Emma, we don't even know if visitors are allowed," I called. "They said I could sit with her, just for a little while." His expression was unreadable concern laced with something harder. Frustration? Fear? She couldn't tell, but he nodded stiffly. "Okay, just don't get too involved." She didn't answer. Instead, she left, Max watching silently from the window as she pulled away. The hospital room was small and quiet, bathed in sterile white light. The baby still unnamed lay in an incubator, her tiny chest rising and falling with fragile determination. Emma's heart squeezed painfully as she sat beside the crib, resting her hand on the glass. "Hey, little one," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're safe now." Time blurred. Emma barely noticed the soft knock on the door until it opened gently. A woman stepped in, a social worker named Isabel, her badge pinned neatly to her blouse. Mid-30s, with soft brown hair and eyes full of quiet sadness. "Mrs. Bennett?" Isabel asked kindly. Emma nodded, rising. "I just wanted to thank you," Isabel continued, her voice gentle. "What you and your husband did last night, not everyone would have stopped. That baby is alive because of you." Emma swallowed hard. "How is she?" "She's stable," Isabel reassured. "Her? A little underweight, cold, but she'll recover. The doctors think she was only a few hours old when you found her." A pause. "No one knows who left her?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. Isabel shook her head slowly. "No note. Number. Witnesses. Abandonment cases. They're complicated. Sometimes the parents are desperate, afraid. Sometimes worse." Emma's hands clenched. She deserves better. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that only women who had known loss grief could truly share. I've lost 4 pregnancies," Emma admitted softly, her eyes shining. "Sometimes I think I'm broken, that maybe I wasn't meant to be a mother." Isabel's expression softened. She stepped closer, resting a comforting hand on Emma's arm. "Sometimes," Isabel said gently, "the children we're meant to love don't come to us the way we expect." The words hit Emma like a lightning strike. She sat back down, her eyes locked on the tiny life before her. Her heart pulled in 2 directions, one part clinging to reason, the other surrendering to a rising tide of hope she thought she had buried years ago. When Emma returned home that evening, the house felt heavier than before. Ryan was in the kitchen, stirring a pot half-heartedly. They ate in near silence, the clatter of cutlery the only sound between them. Finally, she spoke. "I can't stop thinking about her," she admitted quietly. Ryan set down his fork. His eyes, once so full of warmth, were now cool, guarded. "Emma, I'm not saying anything crazy," she said, her voice cracking. I feel like we were meant to find her." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "We can't fill this hole by clinging to something that doesn't belong to us." The words stung more than he could have known. Emma blinked back tears. "She was thrown away, Ryan, like she didn't matter. And maybe she doesn't mean anything to you, but that's not fair," he snapped, his voice sharp. "Don't put this on me." Max growled low in his throat from the corner, sensing the tension. The conversation collapsed into another thick silence. Emma pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. She looked at Ryan, truly looked, and realized something devastating. She didn't recognize the man sitting across from her anymore, and deep down she wasn't sure if he recognized her either. The cold wind of early autumn brushed against Emma's skin as she tightened her scarf around her neck. Beside her, Ryan walked in silence, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his coat. Between them trotted Max, their 5-year-old German shepherd, the only thing that still felt solid between them. The park was quiet that evening, only the crunch of fallen leaves under their shoes breaking the silence. It should have been peaceful. Instead, the air was thick with something unspoken, distance, pain, and the kind of loneliness that can exist even when you're standing right next to the person you once loved more than life itself. Emma cast a glance at Ryan. His face was set, distant. He hadn't really looked at her in months. They barely spoke except for the polite necessities. "Pass the salt." "Did you walk, Max? What time is your meeting?" It was as if the loss they had both suffered again and again had hollowed them out from the inside. 4 miscarriages in 6 years. The last one nearly destroyed her. And him. And the marriage they had once believed unbreakable. They had been trying to rebuild. Date nights, counseling, long walks like this one. But nothing truly healed. Nothing filled the silent ache. And then, without warning, Max's leash yanked hard. The sudden force ripped through Ryan's grip, and before either of them could react, the dog bolted down a narrow side path, barking wildly. "Max!" Ryan shouted, snapping out of his daze. Emma's heart leapt into her throat. They both broke into a run, chasing after the dog with panic surging through their veins. Max stopped abruptly near an overflowing trash can beside an alley, barking in distress, pawing at the metal bin. At first, neither Emma nor Ryan could make sense of what they were seeing. "What the hell?" Ryan muttered, stepping forward. But Max wouldn't stop barking. Emma's eyes scanned the trash, and then something caught her eye. Something small, pale, moving. She froze. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. There, half buried in dirty rags and crumpled paper, was a baby. A tiny newborn baby. Emma's breath caught. Time seemed to stop. The world, the wind, the cold, the weight of all her grief faded into a distant hum. As she stumbled forward, her knees buckling beneath her as she dropped to the ground. "Oh my God," she gasped, tears already streaming down her face. "Oh my God, Ryan, it's a baby." Ryan stood frozen, his face drained of color, his mouth working but no words coming out. Max whimpered, nudging the fragile bundle with his nose as if he understood the gravity of what he had found. As if he knew that the life in that trash can needed saving. Emma reached into the filth, her hands shaking violently. She pulled the baby into her arms, cradling the cold, fragile form against her chest. The baby, a girl, let out the softest, weakest cry Emma had ever heard. Her skin was icy, her lips tinged blue. We need to call someone," Ryan stammered, finally snapping into action, fumbling for his phone. But Emma couldn't tear her eyes away. The weight of the tiny child in her arms felt like something otherworldly. She rocked the baby instinctively, her heart cracking wide open with a flood of emotion she hadn't felt in years. Pure, fierce, protective love. Something deep inside. Her shifted. The ambulance arrived within minutes, though to Emma it felt like a lifetime. Medics moved quickly, taking the baby from her trembling arms. The baby's cries faded as she was carried away, bundled tightly, given oxygen, rushed toward care. Emma stood in the empty street afterward, her arms still curled around an invisible weight, her body shaking. Ryan put a hand on her shoulder, but she didn't feel it. Her eyes followed the ambulance until the flashing lights disappeared. Max pressed his body close to her leg, his brown eyes soft, worried. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Emma felt something crack inside. The numb shell she had built around herself. It wasn't just heartbreak. It wasn't just sorrow. It was something else, something terrifying and beautiful. Hope. As they walked home in silence. The air between her and Ryan still felt fragile, but something had shifted. Emma didn't know what would come next. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. That baby had been placed in their path for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it was only just beginning.